Whenever a popular book becomes a film, there's always going to be the notion that the book is always better. And yet, for Chuck Palahniuk's Fight Club, many people are unaware there even was a book, the film being so much more popular than it. And yet there's one adaptation that hasn't had the same popularity at all. Welcome to From Page to Pixel. Before you even get into the game properly, Fight Club shows us a little scene of this guy hitting a detonator and causing an explosion of a skyscraper's windows, acting as the eyes of a menacing smiley face. This looks cool, but for some reason this scene just plays on a loop unless you hit start. Maybe this is to give it an arcade feel to this game, since with a name like Fight Club it's pretty obvious what type of game this is going to be. Again, before starting the game you choose one of three fighting styles: martial artist, brawler or grappler. No further description is given of these fighting styles, and I went with martial artist purely because I thought it would be the most visually interesting of the bunch. The book doesn't really go into that much detail about the way members of Fight Club actually fight, beyond noting that skinny guys only fight skinny guys because skinny guys are full of energy and rarely tap out, and so I feel this adds a little bit more to the fight in a Fight Club. However, this focus on the fight in a Fight Club is kind of a blessing and a curse. So once we choose a fighting style and enter our name, we get a cutscene that shows a bunch of half-naked guys in a room touching each other's bodies and making noises. Our character states he's looking for Tyler Durden, gets called a virgin. Then we're told Rule 8 of Fight Club, which is, if it's your first night at Fight Club, you have to fight. We're thrown straight into the gameplay, fighting a guy called Ricky. In case you still haven't figured it out, Fight Club is a fighting game, a 3D one to be precise, although the 3D environment is kinda awkward to navigate thanks to the side view camera giving us this kinda 2D, kinda 3D perspective, and you can never be too sure whether your character is going to go in the direction you want them to go in, or just slightly veer off to the left or right. I know lots of 3D fighting games like Tekken and even Sonic the Fighters do this, but they did it a lot better, since movement overall in this game is just sluggish. The gameplay of the fights is pretty much what you'd expect, although there's no ability to jump, so my dream of jump kicking Jared Leto in the face is unfulfilled. You've got standard punch and kick attacks, with your fighting style giving you more specialised attacks, the martial artist getting a really high kick, the grappler shoving their hand in your face, and the brawler can add their elbow into the mix. You can block your opponent's attacks, and apparently you can counter attacks if you hit the block button and move the left thumbstick in the opposite direction to the attack, although I just could never get the timing right for this. The combos in the game are extremely shallow, because there's little change in the attack animations during combos, so I was never entirely sure if I'd pulled combos off correctly because there was no visual indication that I'd done something cool. But the game does have a unique selling point when it comes to visuals thanks to its bone break animations, and these do look cool. Get your opponent's health down so that a yellow caution sign appears underneath their health bar and you'll be able to break some of their bones. Pressing square and X breaks an arm, pressing circle and triangle breaks ribs, R2 breaks a leg, and L2 breaks the opponent's neck. If a character's arm is broken but they still have health, they continue the fight one-handed, or tap out. Tapping out of a fight is one of two ways fights end in the book, the other being for the opponent to go limp. Unfortunately, opponents do not go limp in the video game, probably because that would be extra animation work. Also, these controls are not explained in the game, but this game did come out in 2004, a time when instruction manuals were still a thing, and some developers expected players to look at the manual before playing. So I'll let them off for not having a proper tutorial. And that's pretty much it for the gameplay. On the one hand, the simplistic style of the fighting makes sense in regard to the book, since the members are meant to be average Joes who maybe haven't even been in a fight before, so simple punches and kicks make a lot more sense than doing a Hadouken or the United States of Smash. But on the other hand, there's a lot more to the book Fight Club than just fighting. The game only really highlighting this once, as in one of the levels you're given a specific task to carry out by Project Mayhem. If you're unfamiliar with the book, all you really need to know is that Project Mayhem is an anarchistic terrorist organisation that emerges out of Fight Club. Project Mayhem is divided into various committees, such as the Mischief Committee and the Arson Committee. So, does the game have us setting up that explosion from the opening cutscene, or going and placing weird bumper stickers on cars like the Mischief Committee does in the book? No, we're given a mission where we have to break a guy's arm. Strictly speaking, this does make sense based on the book, since it could well be a task a member of the Assault Committee is given, but it feels like the developers doing the bare minimum to fit something from the book into the game's already existing fighting system, rather than an inspired way of including elements from the book. Even the reason for breaking the guy's arm is kind of forced into the plot and really basic. In the book, BRAWLER details how the assault committee is given the task of forcing regular guys off of the street into a fight, and then these committee members purposely have to lose the fight. The rationale for this being that by forcing someone to fight and having them win that fight, they realise how powerful they are outside of the usual 9 to 5 they call their life. So, what interesting reason do we have for breaking this guy's arm?
Broken deal, broken arm.
So revenge is the reason then. Honestly, this seems like it's just trying to be badass and edgy rather than, actually doing something interesting with the ideas from the book. Okay, so overall the gameplay is just an extremely basic fighting game that offers nothing new except some cool, bone-breaking visuals, which Mortal Kombat would go on to do a lot better anyway. And in many ways, this misses the point and nuances of the book, since the book story ultimately stands as a rejection of the hypermasculine ideal presented by both Fight Club and Project Mayhem, while understanding the reasoning behind said ideal. But what about the story? How is Fight Club's story told in the game? Well, the game's story kinda diverges from the book a little in order to accommodate the player character. I call my player character Sunny because that's my name, so every time I talk about Sunny, I'm talking about the character, not myself. Remember how at the start of the game Sunny said he was looking for Tyler Durden? Well, that's the plot. Okay, that is a little unfair, but basically the whole game Sunny is looking for Tyler, and every time Sunny asks someone where Tyler is, this starts a fight. But once Sunny beats them, they reveal where Tyler is, and Sunny is always just slightly too late. Very basic stuff, but it does work at least as a sightseeing tour of the locations and characters of Fight Club. Since that's pretty much the story explained, I'll focus now on the characters of the story and how the game interprets them. The first major character from the book Sunny meets is Robert Paulson, better known as Big Bob, and voiced by none other than Meatloaf. Bob is very important to the plot of the book, with his introduction serving as a way of not just setting the tone for Fight Club, but also highlighting its major themes. Bob used to be a bodybuilder, but years of injecting his veins with testosterone and God knows what else resulted in his body overproducing estrogen in order to counteract that, leading to Bob growing what Paulinick describes as bitch tits. The book's narrator first meets Bob in a testicular cancer survivors support group, the narrator crying in between Bob's bosoms while the two reassure each other that they are still men. It's hardly subtle that both characters are insecure about their masculinity, with Bob being a really interesting character, since he's been on both sides of the masculine-feminine spectrum, by being a bodybuilder only to become essentially a mother figure to the main character. So what happens when Sunny meets Bob? Well, it starts off with Sunny being told by Angelface to off, and Bob coming over to explain that really this is part of a test. If you read the book, you'll know that members of Project Mayhem have to stand outside the headquarters for 3 days with no encouragement, as a sort of test of character and resolve. This is not explained by Bob, so Sunny's left in the dark about what Bob's talking about, but I will say this. Bob coming over and at least sort of explaining the test does present his feminine, and dare I say maternal side, since he's taking care of the new Project Mayhem baby. Then the camera and Sunny's gaze linger on Bob's chest, and Bob states,
"It's, testicular cancer. Cancer gives you those. The drugs did."
Changing the cause of Bob's bitch tits from bodybuilding drugs gone too far to testicular cancer drugs comes across as a way for the writers of the game's story to quickly explain Bob's appearance before moving on, rather than an interesting change someone spent time thinking about and writing into the story. Finally, Bob states,
"So, you're looking for Tyler. These guys are not going to trust you until you fight." "I can fight. What are you waiting for?"
And then Sunny fights Bob. Again, this exhibits that mother hen quality of Bob protecting his chicks, or does it? I can't help but think this is just a convenient way for the plot to put Sunny into another fight with a shallow interpretation of a character from the book, rather than an exhibition of a good understanding of the character. To further that line of argument, let's see how other characters from the book are introduced into the story. I just mentioned how Angelface tells Sunny to off, and that's his introduction. Hardly enlightening. Anyway, Paulinick introduces Angelface as a very good looking guy, with the narrator of the book beating the crap out of the guy one night when he wanted to, as he says in the book, destroy something beautiful. This being the catalyst for the creation of Project Mayhem, as Fight Club is no longer seen as a sufficient outlet for the character's rage. Angel Face becomes less beautiful physically as the book progresses, but he does become very loyal to Project Mayhem, acting as a sort of ringleader and mentor for the new members of the project. In the game, Sonny goes to Seattle in his attempt to find Tyler. Sonny ultimately doesn't find Tyler, and when he eventually returns back to Paper Street, the home of Project Mayhem, Angel Face is annoyed with him because, according to Angel Face, Sonny stole his spot at Seattle. Even though the only reason Sonny went to Seattle in the first place was because Bob told him he'd find Tyler there. It doesn't seem like Sonny stole anything, so this just doesn't make sense. If I'm being kind, I think what the game's writers were trying to do here is to highlight jealousy within Angel Face because Sonny has become close to Tyler Durden, kinda mirroring the part in the book where the narrator feels rejected by Tyler because Tyler spends more time with Marla Singer, Fight Club and Project Mayhem than with him. Make of the not so subtle homoerotic subtext there what you will. But in the game, Sonny isn't the favourite of Tyler Durden. He hasn't even met Tyler yet, so there is no logical explanation for Angel Face's jealousy. Unless, once again, this is an example of the game's writers inserting a shallow representation of the book's character into the plot just so Sonny has another familiar face to disfigure. Sorry, I wrote out the whole script, recorded it, got to edit in the video and realised I never mentioned Raymond Hessel, so I'll talk about him now quickly. Raymond isn't exactly a major character in the book. He appears in one small chapter, but he is important. When the main character meets Raymond, he holds a gun to Raymond's head, pretty much convinces the guy he's going to die, and asks Raymond what he wanted to do with his life. When Raymond finally says he wants to be a vet, the main character takes away his driver's license, which has Raymond's address on it, and tells Raymond if he doesn't get into veterinary school within a month, he will die. I think the goal here is less to convince Raymond to follow his dreams, and more just to make sure the guy isn't a failure who does the bare minimum to stay alive and nothing else. Almost a reminder that you're alive and you're going to die, so why not live beyond the creature comforts of your life? In the game, Sonny goes to the new Chicago chapter of Fight Club, where Raymond is the leader, and Raymond just tells Sonny because it's his first night there, he has to fight. So they fight, and once Sonny beats him, Raymond gives him the Project Mayhem assignment. While I wouldn't say I'm against the idea of Raymond joining Fight Club, wouldn't he, and more importantly the main character of the book, prefer if Raymond focused more on his studies? Yeah, so this is probably the best example of the game using characters from the book as nothing more than the next fight for Sonny, since the game's character doesn't do anything resembling his book counterpart. There's one more character from the book Sonny meets, and that is of course the man himself, Tyler Durden. Now there are going to be some pretty major spoilers ahead, so if you don't want the story of Fight Club spoiled, I recommend you leave the video now. See ya! Still here? Good. So yeah, as you probably know, Tyler Durden and the unnamed main character of Fight Club are one and the same. The main character is suffering from schizophrenia. In the book, the main character doesn't find out Tyler Durden is a part of his mind until the climax of the story. This twist revealed brilliantly, the main character pretty much breaking the fourth wall, stating to the reader, "We have lost cabin pressure," as his world starts crumbling. Credit where credit's due. The game's writer's choice in how to show this to the audience is actually interesting, and dare I say it, good? Basically, Sonny finds Tyler and tries to talk to him, but Tyler and the book's main character keep arguing amongst themselves, each identity struggling for control. I'm pretty sure this isn't how schizophrenia works, but then the book doesn't present an entirely accurate portrayal of the condition either. Here, the insanity of Tyler is presented in a way that goes beyond the book, since within Paul and Nick's narrative, the main character's love for Tyler kind of rubs off on the reader as well. So when Tyler commits one of his crazy acts, both the narrator and reader understand the rationale behind it, making it seem less crazy than it is. The game does away with rationality, and instead we get this clearly off-the-rails guy trying and failing to deal with a mental illness. Admittedly, it can be argued here that once again the game's writers have shallowly represented Tyler Durden, since that character is reduced to just being someone insane. But because the game presents the character in an interesting way, I'm going to let the writers get away with it, just this once. Sonny then goes on to fight the book's main character, who in the game is given the name Jack. which has inverted commas around it, which is based on a name that the main character of the Fight Club film refers to himself to, not the book. Anyway, I can't help but think the game could have done more with his fight, like have Sonny fighting Jack until Jack's health gets so far down, and then having to fight Tyler, who I don't know could do increased damage to the player, and Sonny has to continually fight against these switching personalities. This would have just been a cool way for Sonny to fight both characters, but no, he only has to fight the main character, who's maybe slightly harder to beat than all the other characters, and then that's it, game completed. But my god do I have a lot to say about the final cutscene. I guess there's going to be some spoilers ahead for the Fight Club game, but do you really care? I'll start off in regards to the story. So after Sonny beats the main character, Tyler Durden resumes control and tells Sonny to meet him on 18th Street and to be a part of history. In the book, Tyler and the main character are presented as nihilists on a number of occasions, at one point proclaiming they want to wipe their ass with the Mona Lisa, indicating a complete disregard for history and its importance. So Tyler telling Sonny that will be a part of history is extremely out of character. I would now like to retract the praise I previously gave the game's writers, since evidently they had no idea what they were doing with Tyler Durden. To make things worse, the next scene we get is of Tyler leaning on a window, Sonny walking up to him and Tyler saying,
"You are my right hand."
Again, this goes completely against Tyler's character, since one of the infamous speeches he gives in the book is, "You are not special, you're not a beautiful and unique snowflake, you're the same decaying organic matter as everything else." This speech pretty much becomes the mantra for Project Mayhem, with many of its members reciting the speech to new recruits, so Tyler calling Sonny his right hand does not make much sense, since he's making Sonny feel special and important, something that Tyler from the book would be unlikely to do given his stance that everyone is crap and should be treated accordingly, or at least not given special treatment. I don't think it's a hot take to say Tyler exhibits ideology similar to a communist dictator. Anyway, Tyler gives Sonny a detonator and tells Sonny no matter what happens to trigger it when the timer runs out. And so, almost as soon as Sonny leaves, something happens, with Tyler shooting himself in the face and not dying, not even feeling much pain apparently. In the book, this is done by the main character as a way of ridding himself of Tyler's presence. It doesn't exactly work instantly, with the main character instead being sent to a psychiatric hospital, but he should, in theory, get the help he needs there. But there are 2 sequels to Fight Club, so obviously that didn't happen. But in the game, Jack/Tyler just kinda do this. Their motive never explored or explained, so all one can really gauge from this is that Jack and Tyler are insane, and as soon as Jack suits himself, he appears to be back to normal. Again, a shallow representation of the book's story. Anyway, then Marla shows up. Oh wait, I haven't spoke about Marla yet. Well, Sonny doesn't fight Marla, and she shows up in 2 cutscenes, swears a lot, and then leaves. In the book, she's the love interest for Tyler, and kind of the main character as well, creating this weird love triangle thing, as Tyler loves Marla, Marla loves the main character, and the main character loves Tyler. But yeah, honestly in the game, she might as well be called Swearing Woman, since that's her only defining trait. She does swear a bit in the book, don't get me wrong, but obviously she does a lot more than this as well. And so once again, I'm going to tell you that her character is only represented at the surface level within the game. Yeah, so Marla shows up, swears at Jack/Tyler until she sees his face, and then they're left to stand there as the game follows Sonny, detonator in hand as he waits for the timer to go down to 0, and then he presses the trigger. Then Sonny gives a speech, which starts off fine.
Project Mayhem has begun. Tyler's going to show us how to get back to the basics, how to weed out all the bullshit. We're pulling down civilization. We will become individuals again.
Now, there's been plenty of healthy debate over what Tyler was aiming for with Project Mayhem. It's clear he wanted humanity to essentially start over living wildly, and his weeding out the bull is meant to be by destroying the capitalist fixation on materialism and humanity's fixation on history. So again, humans focus on survival. But if humanity is focused purely on survival, are they really going to be individuals, or will they be living and hunting in packs? Personally, I think it's going to be the latter. So Sonny saying we will become individuals again is just incorrect. Maybe I'm thinking about this too much, but maybe the game's writers didn't think about this at all. I will say that the visuals here, while clearly inspired by the same scene from the movie, are pretty impressive for a game from 2004. I'm really confused about that. Obviously, I've already mentioned the simple animations in the gameplay, And if you've been watching this video and not just listening, you'll have noticed that I've presented freeze frames for most of the cutscenes. Here's the thing, that's not a choice by me to get past copyright issues, no. The game's cutscenes, apart from the opening and closing scene, are presented as stills. What the hell happened to the budget for this game? Bear in mind, they licensed music from Korn, Limp Bizkit, the Chemical Brothers, and more big name musical acts from the 90s for this game. They managed to get Meatloaf to return to voice his character from the movie, and even had Fred Durst from Limp Bizkit as a playable character, meaning they paid for his likeness. They could afford all that. They could afford a pretty good looking opening and closing cutscene, but they couldn't animate the rest? Honestly, Fred Durst is so unneeded in the game, why didn't they just get rid of him, negating the need to pay for his likeness? I did a small bit of digging, like I did for the Golden Compass, thinking I'd find something out by looking at the game's appearance at various shows. What I found is kinda bizarre. There's a trailer for the game from E3 2004 which has costumes, animations, and even parts of a cutscene which don't appear in the final game, so clearly quite a lot from the game had to be cut. And playing the game is pretty evident it was rushed to release, even though the movie was 5 years old at that point, but yeah. If Matt McMuscles could take a look at what happened here, that would be great. Also, one quick final note on the visuals. I do like that there are quite a lot of different body types in this game, which is in line with the source material since the members of Fight Club are just regular people, not boxers. Characters like Tyler and Jack are ripped, but people like Lou and even Sonny have a bit of chub on them, just looking like guys who haven't done much cardio recently, which is just like the real life Sonny. But they do all have big biceps and, with the exception of Big Bob, massive pecs, so I'm going to have to retract my praise on this one as well. Fight Club the game is just a blatant cash grab that has barely anything to do with its source material, full of shallow gameplay and a shallow story. And yet, I kinda have to recommend it, just because of how stupidly edgy the dialogue is. So in this case, read the book, then have a laugh at the game. Thanks a lot for watching the full video. Yeah, so I made a whole video on Fight Club without making a joke about rules 1 and 2. Unless of course you count this as a joke. I mean, there's nothing funny about it, to be honest with you, but you know, I am at least mentioning it, so I suppose that could be considered a joke in some way.